All right, what's up? By now, we're all kind of reeling, a little bit recovering, and kind of working through this new rule, this new coaching change that Valve just announced. For those of you who might not have seen it, don't know why you're watching this video if you don't already know, but the coaches now in Counter-Strike can only communicate with their team during warm-up, during halftime, and during 30-second timeouts that can be called, and they're given 4 of those per match. And that's still a little bit confusing in terms of whether each team gets 4 30-second timeouts or if there are 4 total, so each team would have 2. The language that Valve used didn't really clarify that, and I've actually had people telling me that it's, pro players saying that it's, 4 per team, and some say it's 2 per team. So not exactly sure which route that's going to go, but that would actually be huge. But generally speaking, just on coaches, this is such a confusing rule change because it's actually causing a step back. Now, I do want to clarify that I don't think this is one of the changes, one of the rules, things we've had changed in the past by Valve. That's like the sky is falling, Counter-Strike's going to end. This isn't by any means going to kill Counter-Strike, and I don't think anyone's kind of assuming that. I just want to clarify that at the beginning before things get too heated. But it definitely is going to cause a step back in terms of Counter-Strike competition. There was just the big confusion about it is there's no issue with coaches. Of all the things that there are to fix in the game of Counter-Strike, I don't think coaching was on anyone's list. No players have come out and said that it's really unfair, that coaches should have restricted access. Even teams that don't have coaches or don't have good coaches aren't complaining about it whatsoever. And in fact, coaching just has no negative impact on the game. And in fact, it actually has an extremely positive. If you look at some of the coaches just from this year and maybe towards the end of 2015, Threat comes in as the coach of NIP, completely changes their identity, completely revitalizes them for a period. This was a flagging organization that was not having any success whatsoever, and this really made NIP fun to watch again. Not only because it actually made them play better, but because it was a completely different style. He took this freewheeling team of individual talent and actually molded them into a unit and make them a really exciting team to watch strategically. They've come up with a pretty standard, what we've seen now has become a pretty standard execution on Cobble. Some of the smoke strats that they innovated on that map are used by many teams in the scene, so increase the level of strategic play in that regard. Zeus, with his time in Luminosity and now SK, he helped them turn into a tactical nightmare. Completely, made their entire system for calling tactics completely streamlined through the early game, the mid game, and the late game. Opponents are having trouble adjusting to that. It's very difficult. It's this combination of the Navi pure tactics with the Fnatic, freewheeling game sense kind of style, and they've found this middle ground between those two styles that's very, very difficult to handle. Starks switching to coach for Navi turned them into this well-oiled tactical machine and strategic machine, that switch really coincided with the fact that very soon after that, leading into the beginning of this year, this was a team that was one of the top 2, top 3 teams in the world, and a very tough team to beat. So that was a huge plus for Navi. And then also, I was just thinking about this. Even some of the best matchups and matches that we've had this year, if you look at the rivalry between Navi and Luminosity that we had, at Katowice was a big one. Even going back to DreamHack Cluj last year, that's probably the best rivalry we've had all year, and no coincidence in my opinion. They have the 2 best coaches in the scene, or they did at the time. They had Zeus, they had Starix. That's just not a coincidence to me. NIP's miracle run to win DreamHack Malmo, that doesn't happen without Threat coming in and changing them. That was one of the most exciting runs through a tournament, one of the most unexpected that we'd seen. And Threat as a coach, they don't make that run. They might not even get out of groups at that event. They might not even make it out of even the first round of playoffs without that coach, without that change in their style. And remember, that was the first time we really saw it because Threat had to play for them at the major due to Pitt's visa issues. Liquid's most recent run at the major in Cologne, that doesn't happen without Peacemaker. Although with Simple in that lineup and all the in all the different ways that his attitude has negatively impacted teams. Peacemaker as a coach finding ways to work with them. All the stories are just those 2 battling it out during practice and find Peacemaker trying to find ways to make him work, make him happy inside this system. Without Peacemaker's work as a coach, Liquid doesn't make this run. Simple's probably not playing within the team as well as he did at that event. So, there's another benefit of coaches just gone. and the thing is, we're just going to see less exciting gameplay now for whatever reason. And this is an issue not just with Valve, but in a lot of the community. People don't quite give being an in-game leader, being that strategic mind for a team, the kind of credit it deserves. I mean, this is a skill, being an in-game leader. It's a talent that you have. Some people are born with it, some people aren't. Some people are born with some that they have to work on and develop it, much like we develop aim. I've covered this in a previous video as well. But being able to recognize what the opposing team is doing, what you're going up against, and being able to get your players, marshal them into a formation that can actually attack the weakness of that setup. That's huge. And that's a fucking hard skill to learn and implement. So by taking coaches away from being able to use that skill during rounds, actually even just during the game, because they can only talk during timeouts and halftime and warm up. They can't even talk during freeze time. They've eliminated skill from this game. They've taken talent and skill out of the game. And I actually think that to a certain degree, we're going to start seeing teams be a little bit more unimaginative in terms of their tactics. I think aim duels are going to rule the field at least for the next 5-6 months. I think we're going to go back to just that style where aim is gonna rule the field for a while. And that's kind of a bummer because Counter-Strike, as opposed to other first-person shooters, this tactical side of things, this tactical element, we've always had players of varying skill when it comes to just pure aiming. And one of the ways that those players have always gotten by is by having better game sense, having better tactics. And these teams that don't have as much skill, better tactics can beat the skill. We see that with, a team like Flipside beating NIP. I'm not saying that's necessarily the result of the coaches, but these are just some of the ways that Counter-Strike stands out as a first-person shooter, is that it introduces the sense that you don't have to have the best aim to be able to win if you can develop these other side of your play. And this is where coaches will help develop the strategic side of a team, develop the strategic and game sense side of a player, really help people improve in that sense. But perhaps the most ridiculous thing, I think, in my opinion, is that coaching has been growing as a role within teams for over a year. Even Valve made changes a while back to allow coaches to have more access to teams while actually playing the game. And this is the thing, we've been given this coaching role. It's been developed, we've had, ESEA's added slots for their practice servers, for their match servers for coaches to be in online matches. We've seen every league basically have these online slots, and this has been going on for so long that now when it's taken away from us, it's just so ridiculous, because there are people who have invested time into becoming coaches, into learning, into really pushing the limits of this role, seeing where it can take these teams. There's teams who have brought in coaches to rely on these guys to call the tactics, prioritizing a coach over an in-game leader so they can have 5 players with insane talent and then one guy with strategy calling all the shots. They've, Navi, Nip, these guys have built their teams around these coaches that are calling all their tactics, and now after a year you tell them that's all been a waste, that they now have to start, at zero. Look at Cloud9, who drops Slummy, who's supposed to be their in-game leader, to pick up Automatic, and now all of a sudden they have to question that as well. Do they actually want to pick up Automatic now? So I mean, this is an issue where Valve has actually turned this into a massive problem by giving it to us for a year, letting teams get used to it, letting teams experiment with it, letting teams develop the role, letting teams rely on the role, and then taking it all away. So not only are they reducing skill, they're actually negatively impacting teams and players and careers and jobs and people who want to make a living. Peacemaker came here from Brazil. He's far away from his friends and family to coach this team Liquid, and now he gets castrated a little bit. Or a lot. He gets castrated a lot. So they've actually gone out now and hamstring some of the best teams in the world. So I mean, all of a sudden, Navi's quality probably going to be a little bit reduced for the time being. NIP definitely going to be reduced for the time being. All these teams are going to start really, really struggling. Liquid, are they going to be able to progress as much now? Because Peacemaker was a big role, in my opinion, of their success at the major. And also, it's just frustrating because this has. I mean, what's really frustrating as well is things that have nothing to do with the game. I mean, what is really bothering is that this is just a highlight. We all make a joke of it. This community makes a joke about the interaction between Valve and the community. The players just kind of laugh it off, but this just shows and highlights how big of a disconnect Valve, the developers, have with the competitive scene, with the Counter-Strike scene, and Counter-Strike itself as a professional game and competition. This is something that has never been an issue. Look at just some of the fixes. These are just 3 of the big ones that jumped out to me when I was jotting these notes down. Is first bullet accuracy increased, taking away crouch spraying, being able to move and crouch at the same time while spraying and have it be accurate, removing jumping shots, fixing the jumping accuracy. These are all changes that we're asking for to increase the skill gap. to increase the amount of skill and talent you could have in this game, to take out some of the random elements of this game, and coaching, taking away coaching instead, it just goes to the complete other directions. Now they've removed skill with this decision, so it's just really tough, where they seem to be imagining Counter-Strike. This decision, we've heard this before, where they want the professional product, the professional matches of Counter-Strike to be so in line with what the matchmaking and the casual experience is, that more often than not we see the professional scene, harmed from it more than helped. And that's not to say the casual experience or the casual players and the player base, the casual player base is not important. They are. It's crucial. But Counter-Strike as a game, even back to 1.6, has been a game where the competitive scene drives the casual scene just as much as the casual scene drives the competitive scene. And for whatever reason, the devs don't realize that, or don't acknowledge it, or don't believe it's true. But the competitive scene is a huge factor into this game's success and popularity. And just to address the actual rules themselves, warm up, halftime, being able to talk during that's cool, whatever. But if you look at what they implemented with each team, if they actually do, since we don't know the exact number, but if they actually are getting 4 30-second timeouts per team, that would be 8 total in the match. That's an insane amount of pauses. That's 4 to 30-second pauses per half, per 15 rounds. And I mean, who knows if they might be able to use all 4 timeouts, all 4 30-second timeouts in one half. What happens if a team has a huge lead, and going into the second half, they just decide to use all 4 of their timeouts every 2-3 rounds, just to destroy any momentum, just to be able to talk things over. There's so many stoppages of play here. As a commentator, that's gonna, one or two 30-second pauses here or there isn't bad to talk about an idea. But overall, it really hurts commentators to get into the flow of the game. It really hurts fans watching the game. To your hype, your excitement for some of these rounds is going to get extremely reset. Every time there's a pause, if there's some kind of slugfest battle going on in the first 5 rounds for control of the economy, and there's a pause during 2 of those 5 rounds, I mean, that's something that how do you get excited with this many stops of play? And that's too much. I like the system of where there's that one timeout per map, and if you see a team forced to use it 7-8 rounds in, that's epic. That's incredible. That gives them such a disadvantage. That's a beautiful play by the other team to get that kind of an advantage, and then it makes it that much more epic if the team can actually come back and overcome that disadvantage of not having a timeout in the second half. So I mean, this isn't like some kind of change that's going to just destroy the game. I think teams in the past have always done well and found ways to have that in-game leader and to have success and have strategic creativity without a coach. But it's just so insane that this decision comes down after a year of when Valve has supported coaches. And now all of a sudden teams have to just readjust everything they've done. So I think that's the big thing, is that this is actually not a problem until Valve just now made it a problem. That's the one really scary thing for me, just because I mean, some of these teams are just so wrecked by this decision. It puts the professional scene back. And that's the worrying part. That's the tough part to swallow. So we'll have to see how this goes. But I mean, for me, I really dislike this change. I think, like I've said a couple times, it removes more skill from the game, and it actually I don't see how it benefits anything. That's the big thing, and I don't see any benefit to how this change improves the game. There's nothing that I can see that has improved to me.